This is Intelligent Minds by EraserDad_4_life. Read by Satori Reads. Summary. Nezu goes on a walk and stumbles upon a small green-haired child with an interesting notebook. I didn't know that you were this good at analysis, Midoriya-kun. Is that perhaps your quirk? I'm quirkless. Oh. Oh. That that changed things. Nezu was having a good day. Summer vacations were fast approaching, and while that meant getting the last of his work done on time, once he finished it, he could take the break to relax. Now, you might think that since his work was high specs and he wasn't human, that he wouldn't be as affected by the sweet promise of holidays as his coworkers and students. That was, in fact, only half true. While he did like to work, as it provided a decent occupation and sometimes even challenged him, he was not exempt of the need for relaxation every now and then. Which is when Nezu found himself wandering around a well-known park near UA. It was a clear day, the sun shining down on his fur and making it gleam. No clouds were inside, and a light breeze ruffled the leaves. He sighed in content. Nothing went over strolling in park. The sound of parents and their children in the background, one crying particularly loud. Well, except maybe T. Snapping to attention, he searched for the source of the crying. It was far too near to him for his comfort, and it didn't sound like the usual temper tantrum kids do occasionally throw. No, this crying sounded as if the owner was not only upset but also hurt. Beneath the sobs, one could hear a slight undertone of pain, sometimes hissing, accompanied with gasps for air. Nezu was immediately on alert, his mind running through 1,000 possibilities. Villain attack? No, I would have noticed someone suspicious way earlier, and there only seems to be one person hurt. Although, what if the villain plans to use them as a hostage? No, probably not. There's nothing here that they could be adamant on stealing or otherwise. Could it be a personal vendetta then? Although it is unlikely a villain would have a grudge against a child. Are they related then? Perhaps. His thoughts were interrupted by a loud, angry voice screaming, "Deku!" And the owner, a child, approximately 8 or 9, barreling into the clearing. The boy, spiky blonde hair dirtied with leaves and twigs, let out an angry huff. Upon spotting him, his mouth, previously contorted into a snarl, drooped downwards and his eyebrows knitted together in confusion. "Who the hell are you?" Now, haven't your parents taught you to not say such a word?" Nezu berated him while raising an eyebrow. The angry child, promptly ignoring him, went back to searching for who he assumed was Deku, and after not finding anyone, he let out a frustrated growl and stomped off. Now, Nezu was the principal of UA for a reason, and frankly, he would be disappointed in himself if he would not be able to piece these two instances together. But despite that, he really hoped his deduction was wrong, if only for the well-being of the child that was hiding in the bushes the entire time, holding their breath. Quickly, after reassuring himself that the blonde boy was nowhere to be seen, he scurried towards the bushes and, in a gentle tone, told the hurt child that it was safe to come out, since who he assumed was their bully was gone. Slowly, a head of curly hair, as green as the leaves surrounding them, peeked out of the bushes and looked with wide emerald eyes towards him. "You knew I was here?" said the boy, voice uncertain and high-pitched. He had freckles dotted under his eyes and a small round nose. The child stepped out of the bushes and eyed him curiously, seemingly refraining from asking a question. Thank you for not telling Kachan I was here, mister." The boy hurried out and bowed, wincing when it aggravated his injury, a blistering star-shaped burst right on his upper left arm. And oh, made that Nedzu angry. It wasn't hard to figure out, with the small firework-like sparks that came from the blonde boy's hands earlier, or the way the green-haired child cowered and seemed wary of his reaction, since he hadn't spoken yet, and it had been a few seconds. "Not to worry, child. I simply did what I deemed right," he replied in a chipper voice, smiling towards the boy in order to ease his nerves. The child blushed, but didn't object. I didn't introduce myself. I'm so sorry. I'm Midoriya-Izuku." Midoriya-kun cried out, seemingly mortified at his rude behavior. "What a nice name, Midoriya-kun. You may call me Nezu. Am I a mouse, a bear, or a dog? Most importantly, I'm the principal of UA." Nezu introduced himself and watched with curiosity as the boy's eyes widened and gleamed with amazement. "You're the principal of UA?" "Indeed I am," he chuckled. "You're the principal of UA, the best hero school in the country. It's All Might's alma mater, and almost everyone who graduated from UA is a highly successful pro hero. The principal is such an elusive figure that the only known facts about him are his quirk and his appearance. It's suspected that he's a chimera of different animals, but no one has ever gotten any concrete info. Nobody even knows where he came from or anything about his past. It's like he appeared out of nowhere, but the rumors are that he was experimented on. Of course, with his quirk, high specs, he can not only erase any trace of his past, but also plan ahead of every move of his opponent. High specs is said to boost his IQ to be higher than humans, making him smarter than any person ever known, which is in turn makes him able to... Nezu could only stare as the child in front of him delved into a mutter storm, not paying any attention to his surroundings. He was surprised at the vast amount of knowledge Midoriya-kun seemed to possess, far greater than any child his age. He was brought out of his musings by said child shoving a notebook under his nose, labeled Hero Analysis Number 8 in a black marker. "Can you say this for me, please?" He rushed out, face flushed from his passionate rant about Nezu. "Ah, he must have run out of air." Managing to decipher the scrambled words, he decided to honor the request and took the notebook after a cheerful, "Of course, Midoriya-kun." Flipping through it in search for a free page proved to be surprisingly difficult, and he couldn't help but read a few entries made by the boy. What he found astonished him: complete analysis of several pro heroes, including weaknesses and ways to combat them. And that wasn't even mentioning the rambles about their quirks, talking about several ways to use them he was sure the heroes in question haven't thought of yet. For a kid his age, this is amazingly thought out. Perhaps he has an intelligence quirk? "I didn't know you were this good at analysis, Midoriya-kun. Is that perhaps your quirk? Maybe I could tutor this kid if he chooses to go to UA when he's older. He seems to have some potential." Lost in thought, he didn't notice the silence that had bloomed, or the way the boy stiffened and hung his head in shame. I'm quirkless." Oh. That changed things. He had considered perhaps teaching this kid, but that plan now flew out of the window. Midoriya-kun had to become his protege. If this little child was already so skilled, he could rival most analysts in a few years. And he did all of that without a quirk. Nezu couldn't contain his glee. Quirks had limits, sure. You could try to surpass them, but there was always a certain point where you couldn't go further. He had learned that the hard way. But someone quirkless didn't have those limits. They could go far beyond any quirk boundaries if they had the right potential. And this kid? He had. Nezu was sure that with the right training, Midoriya-kun could accomplish unimaginable feats. And he wanted to be the one to awaken that potential in him. He snapped back to attention and saw that the boy had shrunk into himself, likely because of his reaction. Or, well, non-reaction. "Do not worry, Midoriya-kun. I was merely thinking." He quickly flicked to an empty page and signed his name with a pen he found in his vest. After finishing with a little twirl, he shut the notebook and gave it back to Midoriya-kun, who looked at him timidly. "Is something of the matter?" he asked patiently. Well, it's just... You're not mad at me?" the boy asked in a small voice. He knew quirkless people were treated fairly bad, but to hear such a sentence from a child who had done nothing wrong enraged him. "Why would I be mad at you? There's nothing you did wrong. If you are talking about the lack of your quirk, I must say that I do not care much about that." "Oh." The boy looked at him with eyes wide in surprise, and Nezu's heart ached with an emotion he didn't think he was capable of feeling anymore. At that moment, he swore to protect this child with all means. "You really don't care that I'm, quirkless?" "I don't, Midoriya-kun," he said in the gentlest tone he could manage, only to panic as tears cascaded down the boy's cheeks as he sobbed freely. He let out a relieved sigh a few moments later, quickly noticing that they were happy tears. They stood there, Nezu patting the boy's shoulder, until Midoriya-kun's sobs subsided. Noticing that it was nearly evening, Nezu pointed out the time to the child, who was frankly sunshine incarnate. There was simply no other explanation for the beaming smile that was sent his way, or the hug he received, before the small child noticed what he was doing and quickly dived into apologies, before running off to hopefully get his injury treated and most likely tell his guardians of the exciting encounter. Nezu's mouth stayed quirked up in a fond smile the whole time, without him noticing. And if his coworkers fearfully asked him the next day why he was in such a good mood, well, they didn't have to know the real reason, did they? This was Intelligent Minds by EraserDad_4_life, read by Satori Reads. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.